You had the baby. Congratulations. Now get back to work. Your mother and I have a car loan to pay, my husband declared, pushing me to find a job just a week after my C-section. My mother-in-law took all the money we received as baby gifts, claiming it was for the debt. But when I came home that evening, a surprise was waiting that made them both scream in terror. And before we continue, I'd love it if you could hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and please, let me know in the comments what you think about situations like this. Thank you so much. Now, enjoy the story. Hannah opened her eyes and for a few seconds, just stared at the white ceiling of their rented apartment in Columbus. Outside the window, a pale September dawn was breaking. Her body ached with a dull, persistent pain, a constant reminder of the C-section she'd undergone only a week ago. Beside her, in his small bassinet, Michael was breathing softly. Her son, her tiny, defenseless bundle of joy who smelled of milk and serenity. Carefully, trying not to strain her incision, Hannah turned on her side and smiled. This was the meaning of everything. For this, it was worth enduring the pain, the fear, and the sleepless nights in the hospital. The bedroom door creaked open, and David appeared in the doorway. He was holding a tray with a steaming mug of herbal tea and a plate of oatmeal cookies. He walked to the bed, set the tray on the nightstand, and gently kissed her forehead. "How are you doing, my hero? How did our little champ sleep?" "Quietly, thank God," Hannah whispered, gratefully squeezing his hand. "Thanks for breakfast. You're the best. Anything for you and our son." He sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes shining with genuine tenderness. "You just rest and recover. I'll handle everything." Hannah looked at her husband, and her heart filled with warmth. She remembered how they had met 2 years ago. She, a freelance graphic designer, had walked into his dealership to buy her first car. He was the top sales manager, charming, confident, and he managed to sell her not just a car, but a dream of a family. Their romance had been a whirlwind. Flowers, dates under the stars, long talks until dawn. David seemed perfect, caring, attentive, and capable of beautiful gestures. He had taken such tender care of her when she had a bad cold, bringing her hot chicken noodle soup and reading her favorite books aloud. It was then, wrapped in a blanket with a mug of hot tea, that she realized she was ready to spend her life with this man. He was the only one who hadn't been scared off by her past, a failed first marriage that had left a scorched desert in her soul and a firm resolution to never trust anyone again. But David had managed to melt that ice. He accepted her as she was, strong, independent, but desperately in need of love. And when he proposed to her at a scenic overlook with a view of the Columbus skyline at night, she answered yes without hesitation. The pregnancy was difficult, constant morning sickness, a threat of miscarriage, a hospital stay. David was always there, driving her to doctor's appointments, buying oranges by the pound when she had a sudden craving at 3 a.m., and massaging her tired legs. It was on one of those evenings, as she lay on the couch exhausted from another wave of nausea, that he excitedly shared some news. "Hannah, I was thinking, we're going to need a bigger, safer car soon. Something convenient for the baby, for hauling the stroller, for trips to the pediatrician, or out of town. I found a great option, a nearly new SUV. Safe, spacious." "David, we don't have that kind of money," she murmured wearily. "We're saving for a down payment on a house. I've thought it all through." His eyes burned with enthusiasm. "We'll get a loan. I'll talk to the bank. I have some connections there. We'll put it in your name, you have a clean credit history, and we'll pay it off together. I'm up for a promotion. My salary will increase. This will be our first big family purchase. For our future, for Michael." Hannah had been too weak to argue then. His logic seemed sound, and the idea that he was so concerned about their son's future warmed her heart. A week later, he brought the bank documents to her hospital room. She signed them, barely looking, right there on her hospital bed. She had more important things to worry about. The main thing was to carry the baby to term. David picked up the SUV from the dealership a week before she gave birth. He drove it to the hospital to show her. It was gleaming, black, and huge. He looked so happy, so proud. Hannah watched him from her window and smiled. It felt like true family happiness, built on love and care. Now, sipping the tea he'd brought her, She felt a slight pang of guilt for her earlier doubts. David was really trying to be a good husband and father. He had taken 2 weeks of vacation to help her with the baby. He'd learned to change diapers and even tried to swaddle Michael, though his attempts were clumsy. "My mom's coming over today," David said, pulling her from her memories. "She said she's bringing her homemade pot roast and some broth. She's so eager to help." Hannah tensed almost imperceptibly. Patricia, her mother-in-law, a difficult, domineering woman with a habit of controlling everything. She had disliked Hannah from the start, considering her some fancy city girl who had bewitched her golden boy. Patricia lived alone in a small suburban house and considered her opinion the only correct one on any matter. "Okay," Hannah replied evenly. "Just ask her not to be too loud. Michael will be sleeping." "Oh, come on. She understands. She's been so excited to meet her grandson." Patricia arrived around noon, letting herself into the apartment with her own key, one David had given her just in case. She walked straight to the kitchen and set down heavy bags of groceries. "Well, how are you two doing?" she asked loudly, without even peeking into the bedroom. "Is the baby sleeping? Good. Let him sleep. And you, Hannah, why are you still in bed? A week has passed. It's time to get up and move, or you'll lie there your whole life." Hannah closed her eyes, trying not to react. David immediately rushed to her defense. "Mom, what are you saying? Hannah had surgery. She needs to rest." "Surgery? Big deal," Patricia snorted, starting to clang pots and pans in the kitchen. "We had C-sections and were scrubbing floors and washing diapers by hand 3 days later. But this generation, the slightest thing and it's tears." She glanced into the bedroom. Hannah pretended to be asleep. Patricia gave her a critical look and pursed her lips. "You need to lose some weight, Hannah. You really let yourself go during the pregnancy. My David is a handsome man. He likes his wife to be in shape." She left, leaving a trail of irritation and coldness behind her. Hannah lay there, listening as her mother-in-law commanded the kitchen, scolding David for slicing the bread wrong. A wave of despair washed over her. She felt like a stranger in this house, in this new family. That evening, after Patricia finally left, David sat beside her. "Don't be offended by my mom, okay? She doesn't mean any harm. She's just old-fashioned, says what she thinks. She's just worried about us. She humiliates me, David. You're exaggerating. She just wants what's best." He stroked her hair. Hannah said nothing. She had already learned that complaining was useless. David would always take his mother's side. It was their unwritten rule. A few days later, on Saturday, Hannah's parents drove in from Pittsburgh. They brought a mountain of gifts for their grandson: clothes, toys, a silver spoon. Her mother, Carol, immediately took over caring for Michael, giving Hannah a chance to rest. Her father, Robert, talked to David about the new SUV and his job. "That's an expensive vehicle, isn't it?" he asked his son-in-law. "Yeah, not cheap," David answered with pride. "But we decided not to skimp on the baby's safety. We financed it, of course. We'll pay it off gradually." "Well, you're young," her father nodded. "As long as you can afford it." Before they left, her mother pulled Hannah aside. "Honey, I don't like your mother-in-law. There's something predatory about her. And your David defers to her too much. You be careful with them." "Mom, it's fine." Hannah brushed her off wearily. "We're just getting used to each other." "This isn't getting used to each other, sweetie. This is a territory grab. Watch out, they don't walk all over you." Her parents left, leaving behind a feeling of warmth and a tinge of sadness, and an envelope with cash. "This is for you and Michael, for the first few weeks," her mother had said, slipping it into the pocket of Hannah's robe. There was $500. Hannah counted it later when she was alone and hid the envelope in a dresser drawer. It was her and Michael's little nest egg. The next day, a Sunday, they hosted a sip and see for the baby. David's friends and his cousin Megan came with her husband. Everyone brought gifts, mostly cash in envelopes. Patricia was the master of ceremonies. She greeted guests, accepted the gifts, and placed all the envelopes into her large purse. "I'll count it all later so we don't get mixed up," she explained with a smile. "You young people are so forgetful these days." Hannah sat on the couch with Michael in her arms, smiling at the guests and feeling a dull anxiety growing inside her. She watched her mother-in-law's purse grow fat with white envelopes. She wanted to stand up and take what was hers, but she couldn't. She couldn't make a scene in front of everyone. She hoped Patricia would give it all back after they left. The guests departed late in the evening. David, slightly buzzed and pleased with the party, was helping his mother clear the table. Hannah put Michael to bed and went into the living room. "Patricia, where are the envelopes?" she asked as calmly as she could. Her mother-in-law, without turning around, continued wiping the table. "I have them. I put them away so they wouldn't get lost. It's a good amount, almost $1,800. Please give them to me. I'll put them in a safe place." Patricia slowly turned around. Her eyes glinted coldly. "There's no safer place than with me. I've decided, Hannah, that this money will go towards the good of the family." "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. It's going to pay down the loan on the car. It will be our collective contribution to the family budget." Hannah froze, unable to believe her ears. David, standing nearby, guiltily looked down at his feet. But that was gift money for Michael, for his needs. And the car isn't one of his needs? A metallic edge entered her mother-in-law's voice. "How are you going to take him to the doctor? On the bus? We bought the car for the child, so the child's money should go towards it. It's perfectly logical." "That's not logical. That's theft. Don't you dare speak to me like that." Patricia shrieked. "I am your husband's mother, and I know best how to manage the family's finances. And you, if you're so smart, go and earn your own money. As long as you're sitting at home, living off my son, you'd do well to listen to your elders." She grabbed her purse, threw on her coat, and marched towards the door. David hurried after her. "Mom, wait. Wait for what? I've said my piece. If she keeps being difficult, she'll get nothing at all." The door slammed shut behind her. David returned to the room, avoiding his wife's gaze. "David, how could you let that happen?" Hannah's voice trembled. "That was our money. Our son's money." "Hannah, well, Mom is right," he mumbled. "The car is for the whole family. And the gift money, it's for the family, too." He came closer, trying to hug her. "Don't touch me," Hannah recoiled. She looked at him, and the tenderness that had filled her heart that morning was replaced by an icy alienation. In that moment, she understood with stark clarity. Her mother had been right. This wasn't a personality clash. This was a war, and she had just lost the first battle. That night, after the party, Hannah barely slept. She lay beside the peacefully sleeping Michael, staring into the darkness. Every word from her mother-in-law, every phrase, replayed in her head like a scratched record. "Go and earn. Living off my son. I know best." The pain from her recent surgery mingled with a sharp, stabbing sense of betrayal. That's what it was called. And the one who had betrayed her wasn't just a relative stranger, her mother-in-law, but her closest partner, her husband, David, who just a week ago had sworn his eternal love and brought her breakfast in bed, had so easily sacrificed not only their shared money but also her dignity. He was sleeping on the living room couch. After the argument, Hannah had locked the bedroom door. She could hear him tossing and turning, sighing, but he never dared to knock. His fear of his mother was stronger than his guilt towards his wife. In the morning, Hannah rose, feeling completely broken. Her head throbbed, her incision pulled, and a heavy, cold stone sat in her soul. She fed Michael, changed his diaper, and after putting him back in his bassinet, she went to the kitchen. David was sitting at the table, drinking coffee and staring at his phone. He looked up at her with guilty eyes. "Hannah, I'm sorry. Yesterday, I didn't want it to turn out like that." "How did you want it to turn out, David?" She sat across from him, crossing her arms. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. She had cried all her tears into her pillow during the night. "Did you want your mother to take all the money while I just silently agreed?" "Well, not exactly. Mom is she's a practical person. She thinks the loan is the top priority. And the baby is secondary? We don't even have money for diapers, David. Your mother took everything we were given. I'll buy diapers." He reached into his pocket for his wallet. "How much do you need?" "It's not about the diapers." Hannah slammed her palm on the table. "It's about the fact that you let her humiliate me. You stood there and said nothing when she called me a freeloader. She was just upset. She didn't mean it. She meant exactly that. She believes that since I'm on maternity leave and not earning money, I don't have a voice. And with your silence, you agreed with her. He looked away. He had no defense, because it was the truth. He always caved to his mother. Her word had been law since his childhood. Patricia had raised him alone, pouring all her unspent energy and domineering nature into her son. She was used to deciding everything for him: which school to attend, which college to apply to, who his friends should be. And now, she obviously intended to decide who he married and how he lived with his family. I'll talk to her, he finally said, his voice uncertain. I'll tell her to give the money back. Don't bother, Hannah cut him off. It's too late. She stood up. A cold resolve was born inside her. She would no longer cry and wait for her husband to protect her. She would protect herself. What do you mean, too late? He asked, confused. It means I will handle my own finances from now on. And your mother, too. As for you, you can keep hiding behind her skirt. She went back to the bedroom, leaving him alone in the kitchen. Hannah opened her laptop. Her fingers, at first stiff, began to fly across the keyboard. She wrote an email to an old but loyal client, the owner of a chain of furniture stores for whom she designed catalogs and marketing brochures. Asterisk, Mr. Peterson, hello. Just wanted to let you know that I am available to take on work again. I can handle small projects on a remote basis. Please let me know if you have anything urgent. Asterisk. The reply came in half an hour. Asterisk. Hannah, welcome back. We have a project that's on fire. We need a layout for a new collection. Can you do it in 3 days? Double pay for the rush. Asterisk. 3 days, with a newborn, recovering from surgery. It was almost impossible. But the words double pay lit up in her mind like a rescuing beacon. Asterisk. I can do it. Asterisk. She wrote back. Thus began her working life on maternity leave. During the day, while Michael slept, she sat at her computer, designing, formatting, and choosing fonts. At night, after rocking her son to sleep, she would return to her work. She slept 3 to 4 hours a night. Her body protested. The incision ached, and her eyes watered from the strain, but she stubbornly pushed on. 3 days later, the layout was finished and sent. The money, $2,000, appeared in her bank account that same evening. It was her first small victory. When Patricia found out that Hannah had started working, she was ecstatic. She showed up the very next day, again without warning, and announced from the doorway, "Now this is what I'm talking about. Good girl, Hannah. A real wife, thinking about her family. I was starting to worry you'd just lie around getting fat." She marched into the kitchen and started acting as if she owned the place. You work! Don't get distracted!" She threw over her shoulder at Hannah, who was trying to feed Michael and reply to a work email at the same time. "I'll take care of everything here. I'll make lunch, clean up." This help was suffocating. Her mother-in-law constantly peeked into the bedroom where Hannah had set up her workspace. "So, are they paying you a lot?" she'd ask, peering over Hannah's shoulder at the monitor. "Enough," Hannah would reply curtly. "Well, see that you don't forget to give David his half. The budget is shared, you know. He has expenses for you, too." Hannah silently gripped her mouse. David had become even more distant in recent days. He saw his wife working herself to the bone but took it for granted. He stopped helping with the baby, citing fatigue from work. He spent his evenings in front of the TV or on his phone. Hannah felt a wall growing between them. Her friend Jessica, with whom Hannah spoke on the phone almost daily, was sounding the alarm. "Hannah, you're going to work yourself into an early grave. You can't do this. You just gave birth. Where is this David of yours? Why isn't he helping you? He thinks that since I'm home, I should be able to do it all work, the baby, the housework. And your mother-in-law is a monster. She's going to eat you alive. You have to put her in her place." "How?" Hannah asked wearily. "David will just take her side anyway, then put them both times in their place. Hannah, wake up. They're using you. They don't see you as a wife and the mother of their grandchild. They see you as a cash cow. First the money for the car, now your salary. What's next? They'll make you get a second job." Her friend's words were harsh but true. Hannah knew it herself. She felt trapped. On one side, the need to earn money for some financial independence. On the other, the constant pressure from her mother-in-law and the complete indifference of her husband. One evening, Patricia stayed for dinner. She had made her signature pot roast and now sat at the table, watching with satisfaction as her son devoured it. "You see, David, honey? This is how you feed a husband," she said instructively, glancing at Hannah, who was picking at some quinoa in her bowl. "A man needs meat, a hearty stew, not this health food of yours." Hannah said nothing. She wasn't eating the pot roast because she was breastfeeding, and such rich food could upset the baby. But explaining that to her mother-in-law was pointless. "So, Hannah," Patricia continued, her tone shifting to businesslike, "I did the math. The car payment is $750 a month. David's salary is $6,000, plus your freelance work. It looks like you can easily make the payments. You'll even have some left over." "My freelance work isn't stable," Hannah noted cautiously. "Then find a stable job," her mother-in-law snapped. "What are you, a child? The baby will be 3 months old soon. You can put him in daycare and work full-time. My neighbor's daughter went back to her factory job a month after giving birth, and she's fine. Didn't kill her." Hannah looked up at her husband. He was staring at his plate, pretending the conversation didn't concern him. "David, do you think so too?" she asked quietly. He reluctantly raised his head. "Hannah, well, Mom's making a good point. We need the money. And you're just at home anyway." "Anyway?" she repeated. "You think taking care of a newborn is anyway?" "I didn't mean it like that. It's just, if there's an opportunity to earn, why not?" Michael started crying in the bedroom. Hannah stood up from the table. "I'm going to my son. You two can continue planning my work schedule." She left, feeling their two cold, appraising gazes on her back. In the bedroom, she picked up her son and held him close. He immediately calmed down, nuzzling his face into her neck. Hannah paced the room, rocking the baby, as tears streamed down her cheeks. She wasn't crying from hurt anymore. She was crying from a clear, distinct realization that her marriage was a mistake, a huge, catastrophic mistake. She had married not a loving man, but an infantile mama's boy who saw her only as a function, a resource, and his mother, domineering and greedy, would never leave them in peace. Jessica's words surfaced again in her memory. Asterisk. They see you as a cash cow. Asterisk. And it was the bitter truth. They needed her to pay their bills, to provide for their comfortable life. Her feelings, her health, her exhaustion, none of it mattered. She put Michael, who had fallen asleep again, back in his crib, and sat down at her laptop. She opened a search engine and typed, asterisk mother's rights on maternity leave, divorce with an infant, division of loans in a divorce, asterisk. She read articles, forums, and legal advice late into the night. The information formed a clear, bleak picture. She could get a divorce, but the loan, taken out in her name during the marriage, was considered a shared debt. She would have to prove in court that only her husband used the car and that she had nothing to do with it. It would be difficult, almost impossible, without a good lawyer, and a lawyer cost money. She checked her bank account. In a month of work, she had earned $4,000. $2,000 had already gone to household expenses, which David had stopped covering, saying, "You're earning now, too." She had $2,000 left. It was far too little. Hannah closed the laptop and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below. Somewhere out there, among those lights, was a different life, a calm, happy life, free from constant struggle and humiliation. And she would get there. She absolutely would. She just needed a plan. A clear, cold, ruthless plan, just like the people who called themselves her family. The day after the difficult dinner conversation, Hannah woke up with a feeling like a coiled steel spring inside her. There were no more tears or self-pity. There was only a cold, ringing emptiness and a clear understanding. She had to act. She could no longer afford to be a victim for her own sake, and more importantly, for Michael's. While David was in the shower, she quickly checked her email and replied to a couple of work messages, confirming she was taking on another small project. Every penny counted. Then she opened a new tab and searched. Asterisk family law attorney, Columbus, Ohio, reviews asterisk. She browsed a few websites, chose a female lawyer with excellent recommendations and extensive experience in divorce cases, and saved her number. It was too early to call. First, She needed to prepare. All day, while her mother-in-law was once again helping around the house, Hannah was pointedly polite, even compliant. She agreed with criticisms, nodded at unsolicited advice, and even wrote down another correct soup recipe at Patricia's dictation. Her mother-in-law was pleased. She decided that yesterday's conversation had worked, and her daughter-in-law had finally learned her place. "You see, David, honey," she told her son that evening when he got home from work. "All it took was talking to her like a man, and she's as meek as a lamb. A woman needs a firm hand, so she knows who's in charge." David smiled smugly, hugging his mother. Hannah, sitting nearby, just slightly lifted the corners of her mouth. Asterisk. Yes, yes. Asterisk, she thought. Asterisk. Keep believing in your power. The blow will be that much more unexpected. Asterisk. At night, when everyone was asleep, she tiptoed to the kitchen. From a drawer where they kept old paperwork, she pulled out the folder with the car title and the loan agreement. She carefully reread every line. A loan for $45,000. A 5-year term. Borrower, Hannah Miller. David's name was nowhere on it. He wasn't even a co-signer. Clever. Very clever. He had convinced her it was a joint purchase, but legally, all the responsibility was on her. She photographed every page of the documents with her phone. Then she found the vehicle registration. The owner was also her. But David was listed as a driver on the insurance policy. He was the only one who drove the SUV. Hannah didn't even have a driver's license. She had deliberately not taken lessons because she was afraid of driving. Another fact for her collection: she saved the photos in a separate, password-protected folder on a cloud drive. She started adding other evidence there as well. She took screenshots of bank transfers she'd sent David for gas and car maintenance. She recorded a few phone calls with her husband where he asked her for money for new tires or a car wash. She gathered material methodically, like a detective building a case. The following weekend, they had guests again, David's cousin Megan, with her husband and kids. Patricia, of course, was there, playing the role of hostess. She bustled about, setting the table and loudly telling everyone what a wonderful SUV her son had bought. "A real man's vehicle," she proclaimed, pouring wine. "My David always dreamed of one like this. We saved up, took out a little loan. Now he drives us all around like a king." Hannah, sitting in a corner with Michael, listened intently. Asterisk. We saved up, took out a loan. Asterisk. Her mother-in-law spoke as if Hannah and her loan didn't even exist. David's cousin, Megan, a friendly, plump woman, looked at Hannah with curiosity. "So, Hannah, do you drive it?" "No, I'm afraid to," Hannah answered honestly. "And rightfully so," Patricia interjected immediately. "It's not a woman's place to be behind the wheel. A woman should be at home, creating a cozy nest, raising children, and waiting for her husband with a hot dinner. The steering wheel is for men. My David is a natural-born driver." The entire evening continued in the same vein. Her mother-in-law praised her son, emphasizing his status and success, while either completely ignoring Hannah or making snide remarks disguised as jokes. "Oh, Hannah, why are you so pale? You look washed out. You must be tired from all the housework. Don't worry, I'll be moving in with you soon to help out. What would you do without me?" At these words, David glanced guiltily at his wife but said nothing. Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. Asterisk. Moving in. Asterisk. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the announcement of a plan. The next day, after the guests had left and they were alone, Hannah decided to stage a small provocation. "David," she said as casually as she could while folding clean laundry, "I was thinking, since the SUV is in my name, maybe I should finally take driving lessons. I could take over sometimes if you get tired." David, who was lying on the couch with his phone, tensed up. "Why would you do that? I do all the driving. It's no problem." "Well, you never know. And it's just a useful skill to have. Hannah, don't be ridiculous. That's an unnecessary expense and a waste of time. You need to be thinking about the baby right now, not the steering wheel. I'll earn the money for the lessons, and I'll find the time." "I'm against it," he snapped. "I don't want you driving. It's dangerous. So you don't trust me? It's not about trust. I just think a man should be in control of the vehicle. I'm the head of this family, and I'll do the driving. Hannah mentally checked a box. The conversation was recorded on the voice recorder that was now always in the pocket of her housecoat. He had just admitted that he considered the SUV his and had no intention of letting her drive it. Perfect. Another month passed. Hannah continued to work like a woman possessed, sleeping only a few hours a night. But she had now saved almost $8,000 in her secret account. She felt more confident. This was her safety net, her ticket to a new life. One afternoon, as she was working on her laptop while Michael napped in his crib, the doorbell rang. Hannah looked at the clock. 11 a.m. David was at work. Her mother-in-law wasn't due until after lunch. She went to the door and looked through the peephole. Her parents were standing on the doorstep. Hannah gasped and threw the door open. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? Why didn't you call? Surprise!" Her mother beamed, hugging her. Her father walked in silently behind them, carrying a large box. "We had some business in Columbus for a couple of days. We decided to visit you and see our grandson." They went to the kitchen. Hannah put the kettle on and got out some mugs. Her mother looked around the apartment and frowned. "Hannah, you look exhausted, and you've lost so much weight. Is everything okay?" "Yes, Mom, everything's fine. It's just a lot with the baby. I'm not getting enough sleep." "And David? Is he helping?" "He's at work." Hannah dodged the question. But you couldn't hide anything from her mother. Carol could see right through her daughter. She noticed the dullness in her eyes, her nervous gestures, and how she flinched at every little sound. While her father played with a now-awake Michael in the living room, her mother sat down with Hannah in the kitchen and took her hands. "Honey, tell me. I can see something's wrong." And Hannah broke. She told her everything. About the loan, about her mother-in-law, the stolen gift money, working through the night, the constant humiliation. She spoke in a whisper so her father wouldn't hear, and the tears she had held back for so long streamed down her face. Her mother listened in silence, her expression growing sterner. When Hannah finished, she hugged her tightly. "Shh, my sweet girl. Shh, it's going to be okay. We won't let them hurt you." Just then, her father walked into the kitchen. He had heard everything. His face was dark with fury. "I won't stand for this," he growled through gritted teeth. "This husband of yours, he's going to answer for all of this." "Dad, no," Hannah said, frightened. "I can handle it." "Handle what? You've let them walk all over you. You're working yourself to the bone while they live off you and order you around." "No, this ends now." He pulled out his phone. "I'm going to call this David and tell him exactly what I think of him." "Don't, Dad, please." Hannah jumped up. "That will only make things worse. I have a plan." Stuttering, she told her parents about the evidence she was collecting for a divorce. Her father listened, calming down slightly. "A plan? That's good," he said. "But you need to act faster. They're going to drive you to a nervous breakdown." At that very moment, as if in a poorly staged play, a key turned in the lock. The door opened, and Patricia appeared on the threshold, laden with grocery bags. She hadn't expected to see guests, and froze in the entryway. "Oh, and who are you?" she asked in surprise, looking at Hannah's parents. "We're Hannah's parents," her father replied, standing up. His voice cracked like a whip. "We came to visit our daughter and grandson. And you, I take it, are the so-called caring mother-in-law." Patricia sensed trouble. She quickly changed her expression to a welcoming one. "Yes, Patricia. So nice to meet you. And look at me, here with groceries as always." I was just about to start making lunch. She tried to walk to the kitchen, but Robert blocked her path. "Don't trouble yourself. We'll make lunch for our daughter. And I believe your presence is no longer required here." The mother-in-law was stunned. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I say. Your help is no longer needed here. Please collect your things and leave." "How dare you?" Patricia shrieked. "This is my son's apartment. I have every right to be here." "This is a rental apartment," Hannah's mother interjected, stepping closer. "And from what we understand, our daughter is the one paying for most of it, and she does not want to see you here." "David," the mother-in-law cried, looking around for support. "Where is David?" "David will be home soon," her father said calmly. "And he's going to have a choice to make. Either his family is his wife and child, or it's you. But you will not be living together under the same roof. Just then, Patricia's phone rang. It was David. She snatched it up. Son, get home quickly. Your in-laws are throwing me out of the house. She spoke loudly, dramatically, hoping to win her son's sympathy and intimidate Hannah's parents. But they stood calmly, looking at her with cold contempt. Hannah, standing behind them, felt her fear recede. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. She had someone to stand up for her, and it gave her strength. David rushed home in 40 minutes. He burst into the apartment, red-faced and disheveled, ready for a fight. Seeing Hannah's parents, he hesitated for a moment, but then he saw his tearful mother cowering in the corner of the entryway, and his anger returned. What is going on here? Mom, what did they do to you? They're throwing me out, sweetie. Patricia immediately began to wail. They said I'm nobody here, that I have no right to be in this apartment. David glared at his father-in-law. Robert, on what grounds are you giving my mother orders? Hannah's father calmly took a step forward. He was slightly shorter than his son-in-law, but there was such confidence in his gaze that David involuntarily took a step back. On the grounds that because of you and your dear mother, my daughter, your wife, has become a shadow of her former self. She works through the night to pay for the SUV that you drive around, while she's at home with a newborn after major surgery. She endures daily humiliation from your mother, and instead of defending her, you agree with it. That's not true, David shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. Mom is just trying to help. Help? Her father scoffed. She took all the money gifted for the baby's birth. She's forcing her to go back to work a week after a C-section. You call that help? David was silent, his gaze shifting from his father-in-law to his mother, then to Hannah, who stood behind her parents, pale but resolute. We're a family. We're supposed to help each other, he finally managed. Exactly, Patricia chimed in, sensing support. And the car loan is a shared debt. Hannah has to contribute too. She times contributing. Hannah's mother couldn't hold back. She's contributing her health, her sanity, her time. What are you contributing, besides criticism and demands? A tense silence fell over the room. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock on the wall and the cooing of a now-awake Michael from the other room. All right, Hannah's father said, breaking the silence. The discussion is over. Patricia, you will now take your bags and leave, and you will not show up here again without an invitation from Hannah. I'm not going anywhere, the mother-in-law insisted. David, tell them. David was torn. He looked at his mother, then at his wife, and her parents. He was cornered. Mom, maybe you should go home, he mumbled. We'll figure this out ourselves. Traitor. Patricia shrieked. I raised you. I did everything for you. And you're kicking me out for times her asterisk? She didn't finish. Hannah's father took another step forward. I will ask you not to insult my daughter. Leave peacefully. There was such a threat in his voice that even Patricia understood. Arguing was useless. She grabbed her bags, shot Hannah a withering look. You'll regret this. I'll make you pay. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. David was left standing in the middle of the room, lost and dejected. And now, we're going to talk to you, son-in-law, Robert said, sitting on the couch. Sit down. David reluctantly sank into an armchair. All right, here's how it's going to be. From this day forward, you start acting like a husband, not a mama's boy. First, you're going to get a second job or some side work. Your salary isn't enough to support a family and pay off that loan. Second, you're going to start helping Hannah with the baby and around the house. She's not your workhorse. Third, all financial decisions are made together. No more, Mom said. It's just you and your wife. Is that clear? David nodded, not looking up. And one more thing, his father-in-law added, his voice hardening. If I ever hear that you or your mother have hurt my daughter again, I will be back, and our conversation will be very different. Do you understand me? I understand, David answered quietly. Hannah's parents stayed for 2 more days. During that time, the apartment was transformed. Her father fixed a squeaky cabinet door, hung a new shelf in the bathroom, and went grocery shopping with David. Her mother took over the kitchen and cared for Michael, giving Hannah a chance to sleep in for the first time in weeks. She cooked simple but delicious meals, and the house began to smell of a comfort it had been missing. David was quiet and compliant. He really did start helping. He washed dishes, vacuumed, and took the stroller out for walks. He avoided looking at Hannah, consumed by guilt. Patricia didn't call or show up. Hannah felt an immense sense of relief. The quiet in the house seemed like the most beautiful music. Before they left, her mother pulled her aside again. "Honey, we're leaving, but you stay on your guard. Your mother-in-law is not the type to give up easily. She's lying low, but she'll come up with something else." "I know, Mom. And be careful with David. He's scared of your father right now. That's why he's being so agreeable. But he's a weak man. His mother will pull his strings, and he'll run to do her bidding again. So what should I do? Save money?" her mother said firmly. "You need to have your own financial safety net, just in case. And keep gathering your evidence. Don't let your guard down. This war isn't over yet." Her parents left. Hannah was alone again, but she no longer felt so defenseless. Their visit had been a powerful source of support, a breath of fresh air. She understood she had a support system, people who would always be on her side. For the first week after her parents left, David behaved perfectly. He did find a side job, delivering for DoorDash in the evenings. He came home late, tired, but with cash in hand. He got up with Michael during the night without being asked, letting Hannah sleep. He even started giving her compliments, like he did at the beginning of their romance. Hannah wanted to believe he had changed, that the talk with her father had worked. But her mother's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, he's a weak man. Asterisk. A week later, Patricia called. David spoke with her in the kitchen with the door closed. Hannah could only hear snippets of the conversation, his muffled voice. The call lasted for about an hour. When he came out, he looked upset. "What's wrong?" Hannah asked. "Mom's sick," he sighed. "Her blood pressure is high. She's having chest pains. The doctors say it's stress-related." Hannah tensed internally. This was predictable. Using health problems as blackmail was a classic manipulator's move. Does she need something? Yes. She's asking for money for medication. She says her Social Security is small, and it all goes to bills. How much? $500. Hannah looked him straight in the eye. "David, you realize this is most likely a manipulation, right? But what if it's not? What if she's really sick? I can't risk her health, Hannah. She's my mother." "Okay," Hannah said after a pause. "Give her the money, but on one condition." "What?" "You ask her for the pharmacy receipts, so we can see exactly what medication the money went to." David frowned. "Why? You don't trust her?" "I want transparency in our finances. You said yourself that from now on, we decide everything together. So let's decide. If the medications are truly necessary and expensive, we'll help. If this is just another way to squeeze money out of us, we need to know." He hesitated. It was clear he didn't want to impose such conditions on his mother. It would be humiliating for her, but Hannah's gaze was unyielding. "All right," he finally agreed. "I'll tell her." He transferred the $500 to his mother. The next day, Patricia sent him a photo of a receipt. Hannah looked at it. Vitamins, a herbal calming supplement, and some joint cream. The total was about $80. "Where's the rest of the money?" she asked her husband. "Mom said it's for future prescriptions she hasn't bought yet." Hannah said nothing. She just saved a copy of the receipt in her secret folder. More evidence. The situation repeated itself 2 weeks later. Another call, more complaints about her health, another request for money. This time it was $1,000 for a consultation with a cardiologist. Hannah again insisted on accountability. David, reluctantly, relayed the request to his mother. 2 days later, he showed Hannah a referral for an EKG and an echocardiogram at a private clinic. The total cost was $350. "The rest," he explained, "is for a consultation with a specialist who has a long waiting list." Hannah remained silent. She knew that arguing with him now would only provoke another conflict. He was on her side, but his sense of filial duty and guilt towards his mother was strong. She decided to be more subtle. She called a private investigator her friend Jessica had used before. This time, she had a specific task. "I need to find out if Patricia Miller, She gave all of her mother-in-law's details is actually undergoing tests at this clinic and what her general health situation is. The P.I., a man with a weary voice, promised to look into it. The service was expensive, but Hannah was willing to pay. She had to know the truth. 3 days later, the investigator called back. "Miss Miller, I have the information. Your mother-in-law did visit the clinic you mentioned. She had an EKG and an echo. The doctor's conclusion: age-related changes, nothing critical. No specialists or additional expensive tests were recommended. Furthermore, we have information from her primary care physician. She's being treated for stage 1 hypertension, which doesn't require constant expensive treatment. She receives all necessary medication through her insurance, with a minimal copay." Hannah listened, her hands clenching into fists. "Thank you. That's all I needed to know." She hung up. So, her mother-in-law wasn't just lying. She was faking a serious illness to get money from them. And David, her loving son, believed every word. Hannah knew that showing him this evidence now would be pointless. He would find 1,000 excuses for his mother. She needed something more concrete, something that would open his eyes once and for all. And she thought she knew just what that might be. After uncovering her mother-in-law's fake heart condition, Hannah knew she had to get ahead of the game. Patricia was like a chess master. Every move was calculated. She was no longer confrontational or starting open arguments. She had adopted a new tactic, playing the victim, the poor, sick mother, abandoned by her ungrateful children. And this tactic was working perfectly on David. He was torn between his duty to his mother and his love for his wife, and it was exhausting them both. Hannah continued to work, putting every spare dollar into her secret account. She no longer argued with her husband about his mother. When he mentioned sending her another sum for medication, she would just nod silently, mentally adding it to her list of grievances. She knew the day would come when that list would be presented for payment. One evening, David came home from work looking unusually agitated. He paced the apartment, muttering to himself. "Is something wrong?" Hannah asked, putting Michael to bed. "It's nothing," he waved his hand vaguely. Mom called. "And what is it this time? Heart? Blood pressure? Joints? Worse." He stopped and looked at his wife. "It seems she's having trouble with her house." Hannah tensed. Her house. This was new. What kind of trouble? She says the bank that holds her mortgage from years ago has revised the terms of the agreement, and now she has to pay a large lump sum immediately, or they'll foreclose. How much? 15,000 yuan. Hannah sat down on the bed. The number was substantial. "David, that sounds like nonsense. Banks can't just unilaterally change mortgage terms and demand a full payment." I thought so too. But she was crying, saying she received an official letter. She's going to the bank tomorrow to sort it out. She asked me to go with her, but I can't. I have an important meeting. He looked at Hannah hopefully. "Hannah, could you go with her? You're better with paperwork than I am. You can look at the letter, see what the terms are." Hannah thought for a moment. This was a chance to see everything with her own eyes, to get her hands on documents that could be the final, decisive piece of evidence. "All right," she said. "I'll go." The next day, she met Patricia at the bank branch. Her mother-in-law looked pathetic, a pale face, tear-stained eyes, trembling hands. She handed Hannah a crumpled envelope. "Here, look. I don't understand any of this." Hannah pulled out the letter. On official-looking bank letterhead with watermarks, a notice was printed about the need for an early partial repayment of the loan in the amount of $15,000 due to a change in the bank's financial policy. The letter looked very convincing, but something about it felt off. Too many generic phrases, too few specifics. They went inside. The line to see a teller was long. Patricia sighed and lamented the whole time. "What am I going to do? Where will I get that kind of money? I'll be out on the street in my old age." Hannah was silent, watching her closely. She noticed that despite her outward distress, her mother-in-law's eyes were darting around the room, as if assessing the situation. When their turn came, Hannah handed the letter to the young woman at the counter. "Hello? My mother-in-law received this notice. We'd like to clarify the situation." The teller took the letter, glanced at it, then looked at the account number and typed it into her computer. "One moment," she said and disappeared into a back room. She returned 5 minutes later with a man in a sharp suit, clearly the branch manager. "Good afternoon," he said. "I'm the manager of this branch. May I ask where you got this document?" "It came in the mail," Patricia answered, starting to sob again. The man looked at her intently, then at Hannah. "The thing is, this document is a forgery. The bank never sends notices like this. Any changes to loan agreements are made only by mutual consent of both parties and are formalized with an addendum signed here, at the branch." Hannah felt a chill run through her. "So there's no debt, Mrs.?" "Miller does have a mortgage with us," the manager confirmed. "She pays it on time. There are no delinquencies, but the bank has not issued any demand for early repayment. This is fraud." Patricia gasped so convincingly that Hannah almost believed her. "Fraud. Oh my God. They were trying to scam me, to take my money." "That's likely the case," the man nodded. "You should file a report with the police. We will also conduct an internal investigation." They left the bank. Her mother-in-law was pressing a hand to her heart, breathing heavily. "Thank you, Hannah. If it weren't for you, I would have given them my last savings. I'm just so trusting." Hannah looked at her and saw a brilliant actress. She had no doubt for a second. The letter was Patricia's own doing. She had created it herself, or had someone create it for her, to stage this drama, to play on their pity and get a large sum of money. "You need to file a police report," Hannah said firmly. "Oh, I'm too scared." Her mother-in-law waved her hands. "The police? Investigations? I'm an old woman. I have a weak heart. Then I'll file it on your behalf." No, don't," Patricia said, alarmed. "Why make a fuss? The important thing is, we figured it out. The money is safe. Let's just forget this ever happened, like a bad dream." Hannah nodded. "Fine. As you wish." She walked her mother-in-law to the bus stop and went home. The entire way, she replayed the events in her mind. This was no longer just manipulation. This was fraud. Her mother-in-law had crossed a line. That evening, she told David everything. He was shocked. Scammers have no shame these days, preying on the elderly. "Yes," Hannah said calmly, "but for some reason, your mother doesn't want to file a police report." "Well, she's probably scared, doesn't want to get involved. Or she has something to hide?" David frowned. "What do you mean?" "David, don't you find it strange that this letter arrived at the exact moment your mother needed money?" "What are you getting at? She didn't ask us for money. She created a situation where we would have felt obligated to offer it to her. $15,000. "Hannah, are you suggesting my mother forged that letter herself?" Disbelief was in his voice. "That's absurd. Why would she do that? To get money from us. A large sum, all at once. But she doesn't have a debt, and we weren't supposed to know that. We were supposed to panic and give her the money, which she would have spent on herself, while telling us she paid the bank." David was silent, processing what he'd heard. It was clear he didn't want to believe it. It was too monstrous, even for his mother. "No," he finally said. "My mom isn't capable of that. She was just scared." Hannah realized he had once again chosen to believe his mother over the facts. She didn't argue. "All right," she said. "Have it your way." But for herself, she had made a decision. She contacted the private investigator again. This time, the task was even more difficult. "I need you to find out who created this forged letter," she told the P.I. over the phone, sending him a photo of the document. "And I need a recording of my mother-in-law discussing this plan. That will be difficult and expensive," the P.I. warned. "It will require access to her computer, her phone." "I'll pay," Hannah said. She had a little over $4,000 left in her secret account. It might not be enough. She sold a pair of gold earrings her parents had given her for college graduation, getting another $1,000. She transferred all the money to the investigator. She was all in. While the investigation was underway, Patricia lay low again. She would call David, complaining of feeling unwell after the stress she'd endured, but she didn't ask for more money. She knew Hannah had seen through her plan and decided to bide her time. 2 weeks later, the P.I. sent his report. It was brief but devastating. The letter had been created on Patricia's home computer. A specialist had found the source file in her deleted documents. Moreover, he had managed to recover a recording of a phone conversation between her and a friend, which took place the day before the letter arrived. On the recording, Patricia was gleefully explaining her new scheme. Came up with a great new plan. I made a fake letter from the bank, saying I owe them a ton of money. I'll show it to David tomorrow. He'll freak out. And his wife, that cheapskate, she'll have to cough up some cash too. She's terrified of lawyers. And then I'll use that money for a down payment on a new condo. I want to move closer to them, to keep them under control. Hannah listened to the recording, feeling a sense of surrealism. This wasn't just deceit. It was a cold, cynical calculation. Her mother-in-law didn't see them as family. She saw them as a resource to be exploited. That evening, when David came home, Hannah silently placed a printout of the P.I.'s report and an audio player on the table in front of him. He read and listened, and his face slowly transformed. Confidence gave way to doubt, then shock, then shame. When the recording finished, he sat for a long time, staring at a single point on the wall. Is that really her? He asked quietly. Yes, David, that's your mother. He looked up at her, his eyes full of pain and confusion. What do I do now? Hannah sat beside him and took his hand. For the first time in a long while, she felt not anger towards him, but pity. He wasn't a bad person. He was just weak, blinded by a mother's love that had turned out to be a venomous web. Now, David, she said softly, you have to choose. Choose. The word hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. David sat hunched over the kitchen table, his usually confident face looking as lost as a child's. The truth that had just crashed down on him was too ugly to be easily accepted. His mother, his sainted, self-sacrificing mother, was a cold-blooded fraud. I don't know, Hannah, he whispered, covering his face with his hands. I don't know how to talk to her after this. What do I say? The truth, Hannah replied calmly. Tell her you know everything. About the forged letter, about the money she's been extorting from us, about her plans to move closer to control us. She won't admit it. She'll cry, say she's been framed, that you set this all up, and you have proof. The recording of her voice, the investigator's report. There's no arguing with that. He was silent. Hannah could see the storm raging inside him. The world he had lived in his entire life was collapsing, a world where his mother was the center of the universe, the embodiment of love and care. David, she said more gently, I'm not asking you to disown her. She's your mother. But you have to set boundaries. Clear, firm boundaries. You have to make her understand that our family is me, you, and Michael. She is a guest, a loved, respected guest, but a guest. And she cannot interfere in our lives, lie to us, and manipulate us. He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. And can you forgive her? Hannah thought for a moment. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, but I'm willing to try to live in peace if she stops waging war. It wasn't entirely true. Deep down, she knew that forgiving something like this was impossible. But she saw how important this hope of reconciliation was to David, and she gave it to him. The conversation with Patricia took place the next day. David went to see her alone. Hannah insisted on it. This was his battle. He had to fight it himself, without her at his back. He came back late that evening, drained and empty. Well? Hannah asked, meeting him at the door. You were right, he said, slumping onto the entryway bench. At first, she denied everything. She screamed that I was an ungrateful son, that you had turned me against her. She cried. And then, I played the recording. He paused, remembering. She went silent, just sat there, staring into space. Then she said, That's not me. I played it again. She listened to her own voice, and her face, it became like a stranger's, angry. Did she admit it? No. She jumped up and started screaming that you're a witch, that you were spying on her, that you want to ruin her life. She blamed you for everything. And what did you do? I told her that if she doesn't stop, she will never see me or her grandson again. I told her that from this day on, all financial help is cut off, and we will only see each other on major holidays. Hannah sat down next to him. And her? She threw me out, said she doesn't have a son anymore. He said it in a flat, lifeless voice, but Hannah could see his hands were trembling. She took his hand in hers. You did the right thing, David. I feel awful, like I betrayed her. You didn't betray her. You protected your family, our family. He looked at her, and tears welled up in his eyes. Thank you for being with me. I'll always be with you, she said. And in that moment, she truly believed it. A period of calm followed. Patricia vanished from their lives. She didn't call, text, or show up. David suffered at first, calling her himself, but she wouldn't pick up. After a month, he accepted it. Their life began to normalize. Without the constant monitoring and unsolicited advice from his mother, it was easier to breathe. David started spending more time at home with his son. He seemed to have matured, realizing that he was now the primary man in the family and the responsibility rested on him. He found a better second job and started bringing in more money. They began saving for a house again, and the dream of owning their own home no longer seemed so distant. Hannah blossomed too. She no longer felt like a workhorse. She worked at a comfortable pace, spent quality time with her son, and even found time for herself. She signed up for yoga, started seeing her friends again. It felt like the storm had finally passed, but 3 months later, when they had almost forgotten about Patricia, a call came. It was David's cousin, Megan. David, hi. Listen, something's happened. Aunt Patricia is in the hospital. David's face went pale. What happened? A stroke. She's in the ICU. It's serious. The doctors aren't making any promises. The world collapsed again. David rushed out of the house and drove to the hospital. Hannah stayed home with Michael, her heart clenching with a sense of foreboding. David came back in the early hours of the morning, his face gray, his eyes hollow. It's bad, Hannah. Really bad. The doctor said if she survives, she'll likely be paralyzed. She's going to need constant care. Patricia survived, but there was no miracle. The right side of her body was paralyzed, her speech impaired. 2 weeks later, she was discharged from the hospital to go home bedridden, helpless. David was frantic, not knowing what to do. Leaving her alone in her house was impossible. Hiring a full-time caregiver was incredibly expensive. We have to bring her here, he said to Hannah that evening, his voice filled with desperation. There's no other way. Hannah looked at him, and 2 feelings warred within her. Compassion for a sick person and a cold dread at the thought of her mother-in-law re-entering their lives. This time, for good. David, we can't. We have a 1-bedroom apartment, a small child. Where would we put her? In the living room, on a hospital bed. He was ready to do anything. Hannah, I can't abandon her. She's my mother. I understand, Hannah said quietly. But do you understand what that would do to us? Our lives would become a living hell. She'll be lying there, demanding care, and we'll be torn between her, the baby, and our jobs. We'll manage. I'll help. Hannah shook her head. She knew the bulk of the burden would fall on her. David would be gone at his 2 jobs, and she would be left alone with a bedridden mother-in-law and an infant. There's another option, she said. A skilled nursing facility. What? He looked at her with horror. Put my own mother in a nursing home. It's not a nursing home in that sense. It's a specialized facility where she'll receive professional care. They have doctors, nurses, special equipment. We can't provide that level of care at home. That's betrayal. It's rational, David. We're not doctors. We don't know how to care for bedridden patients. We could end up hurting her. There, she'll get qualified help. They argued until they were hoarse. David wouldn't listen. To him, putting his mother in a facility was tantamount to throwing her out on the street. Hannah tried to appeal to logic, but he could only hear his own emotions. Finally, they reached a compromise. Fine, Hannah said. Let's try. We'll bring her here for 1 month. If we can handle it, she stays. If not, we revisit the discussion about a facility. David grabbed her hands gratefully. Thank you, Hannah. I knew you'd understand. They moved Patricia in. They bought a medical bed, an anti-bedsore mattress, a wheelchair. Their small 1-bedroom apartment became incredibly cramped. They put her bed in the living room, sectioned off by a folding screen. They moved onto the old sofa in the small dining nook. The first week was a nightmare. Patricia was a demanding and difficult patient. She couldn't speak clearly, but she would moan expressively, demanding water, to be turned over, to have her pillow fluffed. She refused to eat the food Hannah cooked, spitting it out or turning her head away. Hannah had to feed her with a spoon like a small child, coaxing her for half an hour to eat even a little. But the hardest part was the physical care. Changing adult diapers, bathing her, treating bed sores. David, who had promised to help, fled after the first attempt, claiming he felt sick. Everything fell on Hannah's shoulders. She was being torn apart. At night, a crying Michael. During the day, a moaning mother-in-law. She forgot what sleep felt like, what rest was. She lost weight, her face became gaunt, and dark circles formed under her eyes. Her work, her only escape, was abandoned. She had neither the strength nor the time. David, seeing how exhausted she was, felt guilty but could do nothing. He left for work early and came home late. On weekends, he tried to help, but his efforts were clumsy and only got in the way. After 3 weeks, Hannah knew she couldn't take it anymore. She was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. That evening, when David got home, she met him in the kitchen. "That's it, David," she said quietly. "I can't do this anymore. What's wrong? I can't handle it. I can't take care of an infant and a bedridden patient at the same time. It's unbearable. But we agreed. We agreed to try. We tried. It's not working. Tomorrow, I'm starting to look for a facility. Hannah, please, just a little longer." "No," she cut him off. "My patience is gone. Either we move her to a specialized facility where she will get proper care, or I'm packing my bags, taking Michael, and leaving." She looked at him with tired but firm eyes, and he knew she wasn't bluffing. He saw what she had become over the past month. She was at her limit. "Okay," he exhaled. "Look for one." The decision was made, but it didn't make things easier. Hannah felt like a monster, kicking a sick, helpless woman out of her home. But she knew there was no other way. Otherwise, all three of them, she, David, and little Michael, would be buried under the rubble of this unbearable life. She sat down at her laptop and started searching. Asterisk. Skilled nursing facilities for seniors and disabled. Asterisk. There were many, with different prices and conditions. Hannah read reviews, looked at photos, made calls to inquire about details. She wasn't looking for the cheapest option, but the best one they could afford with good medical care, rehabilitation services, and a humane approach. David sat beside her, watching in silence. The sorrow of the world was written on his face. "Look," Hannah said, turning the screen towards him. "Here's a decent option. Outside the city, near a state park, fresh air. The rooms are shared, but they're clean and bright. 5 meals a day, 24/7 care, physical therapy, massage." He looked at the photos of smiling elderly residents. "How much does it cost?" Hannah told him the price. It was high, almost half of their combined income, but it was less expensive than hiring a 24/7 home caregiver. "We can afford it," she said. "You're working 2 jobs. I'll start taking projects again. We'll manage." He nodded. "Let's go check it out." The next day, after leaving Michael with her friend Jessica, they drove to the facility. It was indeed located in a picturesque spot. It was clean, orderly, with polite staff. The head doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes, gave them a tour, showed them the rooms, the dining hall, and the therapy rooms. "We understand how difficult this decision is," he told them, as they were leaving. "But believe me, your mother will be under professional supervision here. Caring for a bedridden patient requires special skills and immense patience. It's very difficult to provide that at home." They drove home with mixed feelings. On one hand, the facility seemed respectable. On the other, the thought of sending a family member to an institution was unsettling. But they had no choice. 2 days later, they told Patricia their decision. She was lying in bed, facing the wall. She couldn't speak, but Hannah saw her back tense up. She understood everything. David tried to explain, talking about the good care, the doctors, and how they would visit her every weekend. She didn't react. Tears just silently streamed from her eyes, silent, bitter tears. Hannah's heart ached. She walked over to the bed and sat on the edge. "Patricia," she said softly, "we're not abandoning you. We just can't cope. It will be better for everyone if you are under the care of specialists." Her mother-in-law slowly turned her head and looked at her. The hatred in her gaze was so intense that Hannah recoiled. They moved her 2 days later. A special medical transport vehicle arrived with orderlies. They carefully transferred Patricia to a stretcher and carried her out. Hannah and David followed in their SUV. The whole way, David was silent, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. At the facility, they were expected. Patricia was placed in a bright room on the first floor with 3 quiet elderly women. A nurse helped her change and adjusted her pillow. "We'll come visit every Saturday, Mom," David said as they left. She didn't answer, just stared at the ceiling. They returned to an empty apartment. The hospital bed, the medical equipment, it all seemed like a silent reproach. "Let's get rid of all this," Hannah said. They dismantled the bed, folded the mattress, and moved everything to the balcony. The apartment felt spacious again, but the silence that filled it was not joyful, but oppressive. That evening, David opened a bottle of wine. "Let's have a drink," he said, to I don't know what. They drank in silence. "I'm a terrible son," he said, staring into his glass. "You're not a terrible son," Hannah replied. "You're just an exhausted man trying to survive." He looked up at her. "And you? Do you hate me?" "No. What do you feel?" "Tired," she said. "Just a huge, endless fatigue." They started a new life, a life without his mother. Every Saturday, as promised, they drove to the facility. Patricia still wouldn't speak to them. She would accept the fruit they brought, but would turn away when they tried to talk to her. The nurses said she was quiet, followed all procedures, but didn't interact with anyone. Her condition slowly improved. Thanks to massage and physical therapy, some mobility began to return to her left arm. She could now hold a spoon on her own. Her speech recovered more slowly. She could say single words but couldn't form coherent sentences. Hannah and David continued to pay for the facility. Money was incredibly tight. David worked himself to the bone. Hannah took on more and more projects, working through the night again. They barely saw each other, communicating in brief snatches. The romance was gone from their relationship, replaced by chores, problems, and a shared sense of guilt. One day, about 2 months after moving his mother to the facility, Hannah noticed an open book on Patricia's nightstand during a visit. She was surprised. Her mother-in-law had never been a reader. She moved closer. It wasn't a novel, but a thick legal reference book. Asterisk. Estate law asterisk. Hannah felt a chill. She picked up the book. There were pencil marks in the margins, sections underlined about spousal inheritance rights, division of marital property, and elective shares. Patricia, who had been lying with her eyes closed, opened them and looked at Hannah. There was no hatred in her gaze now, just a cold, triumphant look. Slowly, with great difficulty, she articulated, "Mine." "What's yours?" Hannah asked, confused. "All. Mine." Hannah stared at her, and the meaning of what was happening slowly dawned on her. Her mother-in-law had not given up. She had not abandoned her plans. Even confined to a bed, she was still fighting a war. She was studying the law to find a loophole, to sue them for something after. Hannah didn't want to complete the thought. She put the book back. "You won't get a single cent," she said quietly. "Not you, and not your son." Her mother-in-law smirked. A twisted, ugly smirk. Hannah left the room, her hands trembling. She found David in the hallway, talking to a doctor. "We need to go," she said. "What's wrong?" "Let's just go." In the car, she told him about the book, about his mother's word. He didn't believe her. "Hannah, you must have imagined it." "She couldn't." "She could, David. She hasn't changed. She's just waiting." "Waiting for what?" Hannah didn't answer. She was afraid to say it out loud herself. That evening, after putting Michael to bed, she sat down at her laptop again. She opened her secret folder, the audio recordings, the P.I. reports, the photos of the forged letter. It was all there. She had thought it was all in the past, that she would never need it again. She was wrong. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new, quiet, waiting phase. She opened a search engine and typed, asterisk, gift deed for property, prenuptial agreement, asterisk. She began to study the law again, but this time, not to defend herself, but to strike first. She would not wait for her mother-in-law and husband to make the next move. She would make it herself, and it would be devastating. She would strip them of everything they were counting on. She would leave them with nothing. It was cruel, but it was just. They had chosen this war, and they were going to lose it. Hannah took action. First, she called the lawyer she had consulted before and explained the situation. Her mother-in-law was in a nursing facility, studying estate law. Her husband was torn between his mother and his family, and they were under constant financial strain. "What do you want to achieve?" the lawyer asked after a long pause. "I want to completely protect myself and my child. I want to ensure that under no circumstances can my husband or his mother lay claim to my assets. But you're renting, correct?" "Yes, but we're saving to buy our own place. I want that future property to belong only to me." "That's possible," the lawyer said. "You would need to draw up a postnuptial agreement. Or there's another, more secure way." "What is it?" "You purchase the property, but you title it not in your name, but in someone else's." "Like who?" "Your parents, for example. But we don't have the money for a house yet. We're just saving." "Then start small. Open a bank account in your mother's or father's name and transfer all your savings there. Legally, that money will belong to them, and your husband won't be able to claim it in a divorce." It was a risky idea, requiring complete trust in her parents. But Hannah had no doubts about them. She called her mother and explained everything, holding nothing back. Her mother gasped. "Honey, what a nightmare you're in." "Of course, we'll help. Open the account, transfer the money. We won't touch a penny. It's all yours and Michael's." The next day, Hannah went to the bank and opened a savings account in her mother's name. She transferred all the money from her secret account, about $12,000. Now her personal savings were safe. The next step was talking to David. She chose a moment when he was in a good mood. He had just received a bonus at work. "David," she began cautiously, "I've been thinking about our future, about buying a place." "Yeah, me too," he said, brightening. "With this bonus, we can put away a good amount. I have a proposal. Let's transfer all the savings we have and all our future savings to my parents. They'll open a dedicated account, and when we have enough, they'll buy a condo in their name and then gift it to me." David frowned. "Why make it so complicated? Why can't we just save in our joint account?" "Because," Hannah said calmly, without pressure, "I don't want your mother to ever be able to challenge our rights to that property. You saw her. She's studying the law. Who knows what she'll come up with? Hannah, she's sick. She's sick, not crazy. Her mind works perfectly when it comes to money and real estate. David, this is just a precaution. For our own peace of mind." He hesitated. He didn't like the idea. It felt like a sign of distrust towards him and his family. "And your parents? Are you sure they'll give it all back? Are you questioning my parents?" A steely edge entered Hannah's voice. "They have never once lied to me in my life, unlike some people." His face darkened at the memory of the forged letter. "Fine," he sighed. "Do what you think is best." It was a victory, small but significant. He had agreed. They started saving. Every spare dollar his bonus. Her freelance income she transferred to her mother's account. David didn't check. He trusted her with it. He was just happy they were moving towards a shared goal again. They continued to visit Patricia every Saturday. Her condition remained unchanged. She still lay in her bed, sometimes uttering single words. Hannah never saw the law book again. She probably hid it. But Hannah knew. Her mother-in-law had not given up on her idea. She was just waiting. Almost a year passed. A respectable sum, nearly $70,000, had accumulated in her parents' account. It was enough for a down payment on a mortgage. Hannah started looking at properties. She found a 2-bedroom condo in a new development, in a good neighborhood near a park. She showed it to David. He loved it. "Should we go for it?" she asked. "Let's do it," he replied enthusiastically. The rest was a matter of logistics. Hannah's parents drove to Columbus, applied for the mortgage in their name, bought the condo, and a week later, signed a gift deed at a lawyer's office, transferring full ownership of the property to Hannah. Once all the documents were in her possession, Hannah put them in a safe. She now had her own home, a home that neither David nor his mother could claim, legally or morally. She didn't tell David about the gift deed. He thought the condo was still in her parents' name and that they were just letting them live there. It was safer that way. They started renovations. David threw himself into the work with pleasure. He hung wallpaper, laid laminate flooring, assembled furniture. He felt like the man of the house, the head of the family, building his own nest. Hannah didn't correct him, let him feel that way. They moved into the new condo in the spring. It was bright, spacious, and smelled of fresh paint and wood. Michael, who was now 2, had his own room. Hannah stood in the middle of the living room, unable to believe her happiness. After everything she had been through, she finally had her own home, a real, safe home. They decided to have a housewarming party, inviting friends and Hannah's parents. "Should we invite my mom?" David asked uncertainly. Hannah froze for a moment. She didn't want her mother-in-law in her new home, but she saw how important it was to David. "We'll invite her," she said, "but just her, and only for a couple of hours." Patricia was brought from the nursing facility in a medical transport van. They wheeled her into the apartment in her wheelchair. She had declined significantly over the past year, becoming thin and frail. A deep sadness filled her eyes. She looked around the new condo. Her gaze lingered on the bright wallpaper, the new furniture, on a laughing Michael running around the room. "Nice," she managed to say. She didn't stay long. She drank some juice, had a piece of cake. She barely spoke, mostly just watched. Hannah observed her, trying to understand what was going on in her soul. Envy, regret, or just exhaustion from a fruitless battle. As they were taking her back, she suddenly grabbed Hannah's hand. Her fingers were cold and weak. "Sorry," she whispered. Hannah didn't know what to say. She just nodded. After the housewarming, their life settled into a calm, measured rhythm. David worked hard, and they made aggressive payments on the mortgage. Hannah also worked from home, but without the previous frantic pace. Michael started preschool. They still visited Patricia, but the visits were different now. Her mother-in-law had become quiet, almost resigned. She no longer tried to give advice or interfere in their lives. She was simply happy when they came, when she saw her grandson. One day, sitting by her bed, Hannah asked, "Patricia, why did you do all of it? Why did you lie and manipulate?" Her mother-in-law was silent for a long time, looking out the window, then slowly turned her head. "Afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of what?" "Being alone." And in that moment, for the first time, Hannah truly pitied her. She saw not a monster or a manipulator, but a lonely, frightened woman who had clung to her son her whole life like a life raft, terrified that another woman would take it away from her. Her methods had been monstrous, but her motive was painfully human. Hannah took her hand. "You're not alone. You have us." Her mother-in-law looked at her, and in her faded eyes, tears glistened. The first genuine tears Hannah had ever seen from her. This wasn't the end of the war. It was its conclusion, a truce, based not on forgiveness, but on understanding. And perhaps that was even more important. They would never be close, but they were no longer enemies. And for Hannah, that was enough. She had fought for her right to happiness, and now she was ready to live this new, peaceful life. 2 years passed. Life flowed like a calm, wide river. They had almost paid off the mortgage. Thanks to David's 2 jobs and Hannah's steady income, they managed to do it ahead of schedule. Michael, now 4, was a bright and cheerful boy who loved Legos and dinosaurs. Hannah was fully immersed in motherhood and her work, which she had begun to enjoy again. It seemed all the storms were behind them. They still visited Patricia at the facility. Her condition had stabilized but not improved. She remained confined to a wheelchair. Her speech had recovered a little, but she spoke slowly and with difficulty. She had changed. The old dominance and cold calculation were gone from her eyes. Now, they held a quiet sadness and a kind of detachment. She was happy to see them, looked at her grandson with tenderness, but never again tried to interfere in their lives. The war was truly over. One Saturday, as they were getting ready to visit her, David said, "Hannah, let's bring Mom home for the weekend." Hannah froze, a towel in her hands. "Why?" "Just because. Let her be at home, with family. The doctors say a change of scenery can be good for her." Hannah hesitated. Letting her mother-in-law into her home, even for 2 days, was a test. The memories of how she had fought for this territory were still too fresh. "David, are you sure that's a good idea?" "Yes," he said firmly. "She's not a threat anymore, Hannah. She's just an old, sick woman." He looked at her pleadingly, and she gave in. "All right, but just for the weekend." They brought Patricia home. David carried her into the apartment in his arms and settled her into an armchair in the living room. Michael immediately ran up to her and started showing her his toys, chattering away. A faint smile touched her mother-in-law's lips. That evening, they all had dinner together. Hannah made David's favorite chicken and rice casserole. Patricia ate by herself, slowly, but without help. After dinner, as Hannah was clearing the table, her mother-in-law called her over. "Hannah." Hannah came closer. "Thank you. Good." Hannah didn't know what to say. She just nodded and went back to her chores. They made a bed for her on the living room sofa. Hannah got up several times during the night to check on her. Patricia was sleeping peacefully, like a child. On Sunday morning, as they were having breakfast, David suddenly said, "Mom, what if you stayed with us? For good." Hannah nearly choked on her coffee. She shot her husband a furious look. This wasn't what they had agreed on. "David," Patricia looked from her son to Hannah. "I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be a burden," David exclaimed passionately. "We'll buy you a comfortable, adjustable bed. We'll hire a part-time home health aide for a few hours a day to make it easier on Hannah. But you'll be at home, with your family." He was looking at his mother as he said it, but Hannah felt the words were meant for her too. He was begging her to agree. Hannah stood up from the table. "I'm going to check on Michael." She went to the kids' room and closed the door. She needed to think. What was this? A spontaneous display of a son's love, or a well-thought-out plan? She didn't believe in spontaneity when it came to her mother-in-law. She returned to the kitchen 10 minutes later. "All right," she said, looking directly at David. "She can stay, but on my terms." David beamed. "Anything. First, we hire a caregiver, just as you said. I will not be her round-the-clock nurse. Second, all decisions regarding our home, our family, and our son are made by you and me alone. Patricia's opinion can be heard, but it is not a deciding vote. Third, if I see even one more attempt at manipulation, blackmail, or deceit from her, she goes back to the facility that same day." No discussion. She shifted her gaze to her mother-in-law. "Do you agree, Patricia?" She slowly nodded. "Yes." "Then it's settled," Hannah concluded. And so, Patricia re-entered their lives. They did hire a caregiver, a lovely woman named Irene who came for 5 hours every day. She took care of Patricia, cooked her meals, and took her for walks in the courtyard. Hannah was able to get back to working full-time from home. Her mother-in-law kept her word. She was quiet and unobtrusive. She spent her days in her armchair by the window, reading or watching television. She never offered advice, never criticized. When Hannah or David asked for her opinion, she would answer briefly, "Do what you think is best." Hannah watched her, still not fully trusting her. She waited for a trap, a hidden intrigue, but nothing happened. It seemed Patricia had truly resigned herself to her new role as a quiet, sick, old woman. 6 months passed. Life settled into a new routine. They got used to Patricia's presence. She became a part of their household, like the old armchair in the corner. And Hannah almost relaxed. Almost, but one evening, while sorting through old papers, she came across the folder she hadn't opened in a long time, the one with the compromising material on her mother-in-law. She took out the flash drive with the audio recordings, plugged it into her laptop, put on headphones, and once again heard that voice confident, mocking, and full of contempt for her. His wife? That cheapskate. I'll find him a proper wife. She'll learn to sit quietly. Hannah listened, and her heart filled once more with cold fury. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't forgotten or forgiven anything. She had just learned to live with it. She closed the laptop, removed the flash drive, and put it back in the folder. She locked the folder in the farthest corner of their home safe, just in case. Because in life, you never know. And it's always better to be ready for war, even when it feels like peace has arrived. The peace, however, proved to be an illusion. Hannah felt it in every fiber of her being. On the surface, everything was perfect. David had become a devoted husband, and Patricia was a meek, almost invisible shadow in their home. But beneath this serene surface, tension simmered. Hannah would catch her mother-in-law's long, studying gazes when she thought she wasn't being watched. She noticed how David, after speaking with his mother in private, would become pensive and distant. One night, Hannah woke to a strange sound. She got up and tiptoed to the living room. Patricia wasn't asleep. She was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, talking quietly on the phone. Hannah froze behind the door, listening. "Yes, I know it's a risk," her mother-in-law whispered into the phone, "but there's no other way. He has to be mine. Completely. She took everything from me. My son, my grandson, my respect. I have to get it back. No, he doesn't know. He must not know. He's too soft. He wouldn't understand. I'll do it all myself." Hannah's heart plummeted. She quietly returned to the bedroom. So, she had been right. Her mother-in-law's submission was a mask. She hadn't given up her plans. She had just changed her tactics. But what was she planning? What did "he has to be mine" mean? Was she talking about David or Michael? The next day, Hannah contacted the PI again. "I need you to put my mother-in-law under surveillance," she said. "All her contacts, calls, the caregiver's movements, I need to know her every move." It was expensive. Hannah had to dip into the savings she and David had been putting aside for a vacation, but she knew the family's safety was more important. The PI's reports started coming in every few days, and what Hannah read made her hair stand on end. Patricia, it turned out, was not nearly as helpless as she seemed. Yes, she couldn't walk, but her mind was working with diabolical creativity. The caregiver, Irene, wasn't just a caregiver. She was an old friend of Patricia's, and she was her eyes, ears, and hands. From the reports, Hannah learned that Irene, on Patricia's instructions, had been secretly meeting with lawyers, consulting on matters of child custody. She was gathering information on how to terminate a mother's parental rights. She was making copies of every document she could find in the apartment. Michael's birth certificate, their medical records, even Hannah's employment contracts. But the most terrifying blow was yet to come. One report contained a transcript of a conversation between Patricia and some man. "Yes, I need samples. Hair, fingernails, anything. The main thing is that it can be proven. I'll pay whatever you ask. I need the result as soon as possible." "Yes, I understand." Anonymous. Laughter. No one must know where it came from. Hannah read this, and the ground fell away beneath her. They were collecting biological samples from her and Michael. Why? For what kind of test? The answer came to her, chilling and monstrous. A paternity test. Her mother-in-law wanted to prove that Michael was not David's son. This was her plan, her terrifying, diabolical revenge. If she succeeded, she would destroy everything. Their marriage, David's relationship with his son, their entire life. She would paint Hannah as an adulteress and David as a fool. And then she would get everything. Her son's sympathy and, perhaps, even custody of her grandson, whom she would present as a child in need of protection by his real family. Hannah sat staring at the screen, unable to breathe. This was too much, too vile, too inhuman. She stood up, went to the mirror, and looked at her reflection, a tired, haggard woman. But there was no longer fear in her eyes, only rage, cold as steel. She got the folder with the compromising evidence from the safe. All the recordings, all the reports, all the proof she had been collecting for over 2 years. She added the latest PI reports to the pile. Then she called David at work. "Come home, now." "What happened? Is Michael okay?" "Michael is fine. Just come home. We're about to have a conversation that will decide our future." He arrived an hour later, looking worried. Hannah was waiting for him in the kitchen. The open folder lay on the table. "Sit down," she said. He sat, looking at her questioningly. "I want you to read this." She pushed the PI reports towards him. All of it, from beginning to end. He started reading, at first with confusion, then with growing horror. He read about the caregiver being a friend, about the visits to lawyers, about the plot to terminate her parental rights. When he reached the transcript about collecting samples for a DNA test, he threw the papers down. "This can't be happening." He jumped up. "This is a lie." "It's the truth, David," Hannah said calmly, "and I have the audio recording." She played the file on her laptop, the voice of his mother, quiet, insidious, discussing the details of collecting hair and fingernails with a stranger. David listened, and his face turned as white as a sheet. He sank back into the chair, clutching his head. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would she do this? Because she hates me. Because she wants to control you. Because she is insane." He was silent, rocking back and forth. "David." Hannah came over and put her hands on his shoulders. "Now, do you understand? She will never stop." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. "What do we do?" "I have a plan," Hannah said, "but I need your help. Are you with me? All the way?" He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Yes, all the way." The next day, Hannah, acting as if nothing was wrong, helped Irene care for her mother-in-law. She was pointedly sweet and attentive. At one point, when Irene went to the kitchen for water, Hannah discreetly placed a small, activated voice recorder in her purse. That evening, after the caregiver had left, Hannah retrieved the recorder from the purse, which Irene had accidentally left in the entryway. She listened to the recording. Irene, upon returning home, had immediately called Patricia. "Yes, I got it all. A few hairs from the kid's brush and a couple of hers. I'll pass them to our guy tomorrow," he said. "The results will be ready in a week." This was what she needed, the final piece of her puzzle. The next day, Hannah and David drove to a lawyer's office. Not on Saturday, as usual, but on a Thursday, unannounced to his mother. They needed legal counsel on how to proceed. Armed with a plan, they went to confront Patricia. She was sitting in her chair, reading. Seeing them, she looked flustered. "David, Hannah, what are you doing here?" "We came to talk, Mom," David said, his voice harder than she had ever heard it. They entered the living room. "We know everything," Hannah said, placing the voice recorder on the end table. "About the lawyers, about the plan to take my parental rights away, and about the paternity test." Her mother-in-law's face turned to stone. I don't lie," David cut her off. "I've heard the recordings. I know you were collecting samples." He sat in the chair opposite her. "Mom, I only want to ask you one question. Did you really think Michael wasn't my son?" She was silent, staring at the floor. "Answer me." His voice cracked with a yell. I didn't know. I wanted to check," she stammered. "Check?" He let out a harsh, joyless laugh. "You wanted to destroy my life, my family, my relationship with my son. For what? So that I would be left alone with you? You're all I have," she suddenly screamed. "I didn't want to share you with anyone." "Well, Mom," he said, standing up, his voice turning to ice. "You got what you wanted. You're going to be alone. Completely alone." He turned to Hannah. "Let's go." They walked out, leaving her there. As they walked through their own home, away from her, Hannah saw on her husband's face not confusion, but resolve. He had finally made his choice. They drove to a hotel for the night in complete silence. David drove, staring intently at the road. Hannah sat beside him, watching the trees flash by, feeling the massive, tight knot of fear and hatred inside her slowly begin to unravel. It wasn't relief yet, but it was the promise of freedom. When they returned home the next morning, they immediately began packing Patricia's things. "She is not spending another night in this house," David said. He called the nursing facility. "We're bringing my mother back. Today." He then called for a medical transport. While they waited, Irene arrived for her shift. "You can leave," David said, blocking the door. "Your services are no longer required. But Mrs. Miller, my mother will be fine. Get out." His voice was so cold and full of authority that the woman scurried away without another word. When the transport arrived, they had Patricia's bags packed. She didn't say a word, her face a mask of cold fury. As the orderlies wheeled her out, her eyes met Hannah's. There was no apology, no remorse, only pure, undiluted hatred. What happened next, they heard in fragments from distant relatives. They changed their numbers and instructed the facility not to give out their new contact information. They stopped paying the bills. Patricia was forced to sell her suburban home to cover her debts and pay for her continued care. She was left utterly alone. No one in the family wanted to speak to her after learning what she had tried to do. David mourned the loss of his mother, even the toxic version of her. Sometimes Hannah would find him sitting in the dark kitchen late at night, staring into space. "I feel sorry for her," he'd say. "I do too," Hannah would reply. But she chose this path herself. A year passed. Their life slowly returned to a peaceful rhythm. David got a promotion at work. Hannah's design business was thriving. Michael was a healthy, happy child. They traveled, they laughed, they made plans for the future. The shadow of Patricia seemed to have lifted from their home for good. But one day, a letter arrived. There was no return address. Hannah opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in a shaky, elderly script. Asterisk. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'm dying soon. I want to see my grandson. One last time." Asterisk. Hannah showed the letter to David. He stared at the lines written by his mother's hand for a long time. "What do we do?" she asked. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "What do you think?" Hannah looked out the window. Snow was falling, blanketing the city in a clean, white sheet. "I think," she said slowly, "that everyone deserves a chance to die at peace with themselves." She hadn't forgiven her mother-in-law, but she had let her go. The decision to go was not easy. David hesitated, torn between resentment and a son's duty. Hannah, to her own surprise, felt a semblance of calm. She had made a decision, and it felt right. The only correct one in this prolonged drama. It was not an act of forgiveness, no. Forgiving such a thing was impossible. It was an act of mercy. A final period needed to move forward. They went to the facility that Saturday. On the way, they stopped at a store and bought fruit and Patricia's favorite chocolate-covered marshmallows. Michael, now 5, sat in the back seat, chattering nonstop, oblivious to the gravity of the moment. His mother's room greeted them with the smell of antiseptic and silence. Patricia lay in bed, thin, almost transparent. She had aged a great deal in the past year. Her gray hair was dull, her face a network of deep wrinkles, but her eyes were alive. Seeing them, she tried to sit up. "You came," she whispered. "We came, Mom," David said, approaching the bed. He sat on the chair beside her and took her hand. It was bird-like, thin and cold. Michael, a little frightened, hid behind Hannah. "Grandma," Hannah said softly. "This is Michael." Patricia's gaze shifted to her grandson. She looked at him for a long time, greedily, as if trying to memorize every feature. Then a faint smile touched her lips. So big. They stayed for about an hour. They didn't talk much. David spoke about his work, about their plans for a summer vacation. Hannah talked about Michael's progress in kindergarten. Patricia mostly listened, just watched, and her gaze held no more hatred or malice, only an endless weariness and regret. As they were leaving, she took David's hand again. "Forgive me." "Both of you," she managed, looking at them. "We forgive you, Mom," David said, though it was a lie. Hannah remained silent. On the way home, David cried. He didn't hide his tears. They just streamed down his cheeks. "She's dying, Hannah. I can feel it." "Yes," Hannah said quietly. "Me too." Patricia passed away 2 weeks later. The facility called them. The funeral was modest. Only they, cousin Megan, and a few of her mother-in-law's old friends attended. Standing by the fresh grave, Hannah felt nothing, not grief, not relief, just a void. This woman had brought so much pain into her life, and now she was gone. It felt strange, as if a significant, albeit negative, element had been removed from her life, leaving a hole in its place. After the service, one of Patricia's friends approached them. It was Irene, the one who had been her caregiver and spy. "Hannah, David," she said, looking down guiltily. "I want to apologize. Patricia. She was a very difficult person. She made me—" "We know," Hannah interrupted. "It's in the past." The woman pulled an envelope from her purse. "She asked me to give this to you." After, Hannah took the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in the same shaky script, and a bank card. Asterisk, my children. Asterisk, Patricia had written. Asterisk, Forgive me, if you can. I was wrong. I was so afraid of being alone that I nearly destroyed your happiness. I sold my second condo, the one I bought in secret. The money is on this card. It's all I have left. Please take it. Buy something for Michael. I love you all very much. Your mother and grandmother. Asterisk. Hannah handed the letter to David. He read it, and his shoulders shook with silent sobs. Hannah hugged him, holding him close. The card had a balance of nearly $150,000. They returned home. The silence in the apartment was oppressive. David went to the bedroom, lay down, and faced the wall. Hannah stayed in the kitchen. She sat at the table, holding the letter, and thought. She thought about how complex and unpredictable life could be, about how love could turn to poison, and how remorse could come too late. She didn't use the money for herself. She opened a trust fund in Michael's name and deposited it all. It would be his start in life when he grew up. An inheritance from a grandmother he barely knew. A grandmother who had fought so desperately for a place in his life that she ended up losing everything. The war was finally over. And in it, there were no victors. There were only survivors, who had learned to live with their scars. 5 years passed. It was a snowy December evening. Hannah stood by the window of their large, bright living room, watching the snowflakes drift down. Their new house was exactly what they had dreamed of. 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a view of a snow-covered park. They had bought it a year ago, adding the money Patricia had left to their savings. David had resisted for a long time, not wanting to accept the posthumous apology, but Hannah had insisted. "It's for Michael," she said, and he had agreed. A 10-year-old Michael sat on the rug, engrossed in building a complex model kit, a recent birthday present. He had grown into a smart, calm, and very affectionate boy. He remembered nothing of the terrible times, of a sick grandmother, or his parents' fights. His childhood was happy, and for Hannah, that was all that mattered. David came into the room and hugged his wife from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "Her," Hannah answered quietly. They rarely spoke of Patricia. The topic was still painful for David. "I sometimes imagine," Hannah continued, "what it would have been like if she had been different, if she had just loved us. Instead of trying to control us, we wouldn't be who we are now," he said. "That war, it changed us. It made you stronger." Hannah turned and looked into his eyes. "And it made you wiser." He kissed her gently. Their relationship, having been tested by fire, had become truly solid. They had learned to trust, to listen, and to understand each other. David was forever cured of his codependence on his mother. Hannah, of her distrust of men. "Mom, Dad, come here," Michael called. "Look, I finished it." They walked over. On the rug stood a huge castle made of colorful bricks, with towers, bridges, and tiny night figures. "Wow," David said in awe. "That's a real fortress." "Yeah," Michael said. "It's our home. We're safe here." Hannah knelt beside her son and hugged him. "Yes, sweetie, this is our home, our fortress." She looked at the castle her son had built and thought that a real fortress isn't about walls or a roof over your head. A real fortress is family. A family built on love, respect, and trust. A family worth fighting for, even if the battle is long and brutal. She looked at her husband, at her son, and her heart filled with a quiet, bright joy. They had made it. They had won. And now, they had a whole life ahead of them to enjoy this peace, a peace they had won together. If you enjoyed this story and believe that you should fight for your family to the very end, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments what you believe is the most important foundation for a strong family.